Welcome to the Alpha Hour of Power, brought to you by William Harper at Speaks in Truth on Twitter. This video series is being presented in order to purify the body of Christ and extend the light of a traveller. This episode will look closely at the rise of Greta Thunberg and establish why it is that she deserves our support, but delve into the nature of a conspiracy that makes her a kind but ultimately a poorly informed teenager. But first, let's read from the particular biblical passage that inspired this Alpha Hour of Power series. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians chapter 4, he issues a powerful call to unity and a purpose for the church. And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. But speaking the truth in love, may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. In the first two Alpha Hour of Power episodes, we expose the cunning craftiness of well-paid deceivers that lie in wait to tell us that 5G and vaccines pose no threat to us, even though these are crude tools that impair our health and have the potential to become sinister weapons of depopulation. Now we have Greta Thunberg leading a global movement for what can be called climate justice, and the cynical amongst us will just see children tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, in this case, the doctrine of climate change. But there can be no doubt that millions of people are completely justified in demanding that we clean up our act and take better care of the environment. So before diving down the rabbit hole to properly deconstruct climate change caused by carbon dioxide emissions, let's hear from Greta Thunberg first and learn about what it is that has fueled her passion.
When I was about 8 years old, I first heard about something called climate change or global warming. Apparently that was something humans had created by our way of living. I was told to turn off the lights to save energy and to recycle paper to save resources. I remember thinking that it was very strange that humans, who are an animal species among others, could be capable of changing the Earth's climate. Because if we were, and if it was really happening, we wouldn't be talking about anything else. As soon as you turn on the TV, everything would be about that. Headlines, radio, newspapers. You would never read or hear about anything else, as if there was a world war going on. But no one ever talked about it. If burning fossil fuels was so bad that it threatened our very existence, how could we just continue like before? Why were there no restrictions? Why wasn't it made illegal? To me, that did not add up. It was too unreal. So when I was 11, I became ill. I fell into depression. I stopped talking, and I stopped eating. In 2 months, I lost about 10 kilos of weight. Later on, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, OCD, and selective mutism. That basically means I only speak when I think it's necessary. Now was one of those moments. For those of us who are on the spectrum, almost everything is black or white. We aren't very good at lying, and we usually don't enjoy participating in the social game that the rest of you seem so fond of. I think in many ways that we autistic are the normal ones, and the rest of the people are pretty strange. Especially when it comes to the sustainability crisis, where everyone keeps saying that climate change is an existential threat and the most important issue of all, and yet they just carry on like before. I don't understand that, because if the emissions have to stop, then we must stop the emissions. To me, that is black or white. There are no gray areas when it comes to survival. Either we go on as our civilization or we don't. We have to change. Rich countries like Sweden need to start reducing emissions by at least 15% every year. And that is so that we can stay below a 2-degree warming target. Yet, as the IPCC have recently demonstrated, aiming instead for 1.5 degrees Celsius would significantly reduce the climate impacts. But we can only imagine what that means for reducing emissions. You would think the media and every one of our leaders would be talking about nothing else, but they never even mention it. Nor does anyone ever mention the greenhouse gases already locked in the system, nor that air pollution is hiding a warming, so that when we stop burning fossil fuels, we already have an extra level of warming, perhaps as high as 0.5 to 1.1 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, does hardly anyone speak about the fact that we are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, with up to 200 species going extinct every single day. That the extinction rate is today between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than what is seen as normal. Nor does hardly anyone ever speak about the aspect of equity or climate justice, clearly stated everywhere in the Paris Agreement, which is absolutely necessary to make it work on a global scale. That means that rich countries need to get down to 0 emissions within 6 to 12 years with today's emission speed. And that is so that people in poorer countries can have a chance to heighten their standard of living by building some of the infrastructure that we have already built, such as roads, schools, hospitals, clean drinking water, electricity, and so on. Because how can we expect countries like India or Nigeria to care about the climate crisis if we, who already have everything, don't care even a second about it or our actual commitments to the Paris Agreement? So, why are we not reducing our emissions? Why are they in fact still increasing? Are we knowingly causing a mass extinction? Are we evil? No, of course not. People keep doing what they do because the vast majority doesn't have a clue about the actual consequences of our everyday life. And they don't know the rapid changes required. We all think we know, and we all think everybody knows, but we don't. Because how could we? If there really was a crisis, and if this crisis was caused by our emissions, you would at least see some signs. Not just flooded cities, tens of thousands of dead people, and whole nations leveled to piles of torn down buildings. You would see some restrictions, but no. And no one talks about it. There are no emergency meetings, no headlines, no breaking news. No one is acting as if we were in a crisis. Even most climate scientists or green politicians keep on flying around the world, eating meat and dairy. If I live to be 100, I will be alive in the year 2103. When you think about the future today, you don't think beyond the year 2050. By then, I will, in the best case, not even have lived half of my life. What happens next? The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children or grandchildren, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you, the people who were around back in 2018. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there still was time to act. What we do or don't do right now will affect my entire life and the lives of my children and grandchildren. What we do or don't do right now, me and my generation can't undo in the future. So when school started in August this year, I decided that this was enough. I sat myself down on the ground outside the Swedish parliament. I school striked for the climate. Some people say that I should be in school instead. Some people say that I should study to become a climate scientist so that I can solve the climate crisis. But the climate crisis has already been solved. We already have all the facts and solutions. All we have to do is to wake up and change. And why should I be studying for a future that soon will be no more, when no one is doing anything whatsoever to save that future? And what is the point of learning facts within the school system, when the most important facts given by the finer science of that same school system clearly means nothing to our politicians and our society? Some people say that Sweden is just a small country and that it doesn't matter what we do. But I think that if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school for a few weeks, imagine what we could all do together if we wanted to. Now we're almost at the end of my talk. And this is where people usually start talking about hope. Solar panels, wind power, circular economy, and so on. But I'm not going to do that. We've had 30 years of pep talking and selling positive ideas. And I'm sorry, but it doesn't work. Because if it would have, the emissions would have gone down by now. They haven't. And yes, we do need hope. Of course we do. But the one thing we need more than hope is action. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then, and only then, hope will come. Today, we use 100 million barrels of oil every single day. There are no politics to change that. There are no rules to keep that oil in the ground. So we can't save the world by playing by the rules. Because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change. And it has to start today. Thank you.
I first took notice of Greta Thunberg as she was preparing to sail across the Atlantic, something I had done the year before. It was obvious to me that she was taking a risk, that is, her and her crew were taking a direct route across the sea in the middle of the hurricane season. So I wanted to wish her well and support her on social media, and began paying close attention to how environmental movement was being rejuvenated by leadership, and also how many were using childish tactics in order to try and dismiss her concerns. The first thing we should all do is pay her the respect she deserves and understand she's being completely sincere and speaking from her heart. As such, the thumbnail chosen for this video shows her surveying the site of an open-pit coal mine in Germany. According to Wikipedia, the mine is on the site of the ancient Hambark forest, which was purchased by RWE, previously known as Rheinbraun, in 1978. They then cut most of it down and cleared it to mine. Only 10% of the forest area remains. RWE plans to clear half of the remaining area of the forest between around 2018 and 2020, This plan was met with massive protests in autumn 2018 and was temporarily stopped in October 2018 by the Supreme Administrative Court of North Rhine-Westphalia. The mine's operation currently, as of the end of 2017, has the size of 43.8 square kilometres, with the total area designated for mining having a size of 85 square kilometres. In the thumbnail, we can see that Greta is angry at fossil fuel companies for the destruction of the ancient Hamburg forest, and I, for one, share her righteous anger. For what it's worth, my family owns a property in the coal mining town of Fingal, Tasmania. Every day a train leaves there to export coal to various parts of the world. The mining is done underground and poses no discernible threat to the old-growth forest and the surrounds. We draw clean water from an underground bore close to where the mining takes place. It's some of the best water in the world. I personally wouldn't campaign to have that mine shut down because it seems to me to be operating responsibly. And I should know, living right next door to it. But even then, this coal is only being exported in order to be burned, and these emissions may or may not be clean, proper filtering being an expensive process that countries like China aren't particularly concerned with. Leaving carbon dioxide aside, and we'll get to why we should, a typical uncontrolled coal plant releases many harmful pollutants. These include about 114 pounds of lead, traces of uranium, and 720 tons of carbon monoxide. But the operators of this mine in Germany have, in their extraction, demonstrated a contempt for nature on such a scale that it can be clearly defined as a crime against humanity and the planet we all live on. Similarly, as Greta was halfway through Atlantic crossing, we learned that the Amazon was on fire. It soon emerged that Bolsonaro, the right-wing leader of Brazil and protege of Donald Trump, who has nothing but contempt for environmental conservation, had no interest in fighting the fires. It also soon emerged that these fires were deliberately lit by cattle barons wanting more acres to convert to grazing land, hoping to profit from an increasing global consumer demand for beef. As Greta has stated, our war against nature must end, even if it means changing the nature of our consumption. But she is at her best when showing a love for the environment and urging us to take meaningful action, rather than pointing people to the so-called facts put forward by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. When Vladimir Putin called Greta a kind but poorly informed teenager, this was really what he was getting at. Here now to get to the heart of this climate debate is the first political video I ever made back in 2009. It was called The Decade of Deception.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
No tall building had ever collapsed primarily due to fire. But that's exactly what investigators believe happened to the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 on September 11th. According to a 3-year comprehensive building and fire safety investigation just completed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires. We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here.
It's a scam. It's absolutely disgusting.
Mr. President, just take a look for yourself. You're a really smart guy. You're a really educated man. Just take a look for yourself. You know what? Let's watch it together. And then you tell me, is that the result of from fire?
No matter what Charlie does in life, whether it's the drugs or the hookers or whatever, people still like him because he's a charming actor, and they still believe him.
is crazy?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. You think he's crazy?
I think that I think that he has a trick gene or a screw loose.
If I'm so crazy, why won't they address what I wrote? That speaks volumes. That shows their hand. I think it's like what Aaron Russo said so wonderfully in his final interview in that wonderful documentary that you put together with him. He says, don't be afraid to be called stupid. Don't be afraid to be called crazy. Don't be afraid to have a voice. Don't be afraid to stand up and say, wait a minute, people,
Nick Rockefeller, okay, who's one of the Rockefeller family. And he, when I was running for governor in Nevada, he came to me, introduced himself to me through an attorney, and we became friends. We started talking about things. He's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told me what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event, and out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, you know, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And we'd go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later 9/11 happened, and I remember he was telling me how how you're gonna see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places, and there's gonna be this war on terror, which is no real enemy, and the whole thing is a giant hoax, you know, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
He told you it was going to be a hoax.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, there's no question. He says there's going to be war on terror, and he's just laughing.
Global warming. There's been a lot of talk about it, about what it will mean.
There's no question at all that the climate crisis is by far the most serious threat that human civilization has ever faced. It has the ability to end human civilization.
We have tried and tried and tried to get a debate on global warming with scientists on the other side. Al Gore or any of the scientists behind him over at the UN IPCC, we'd love to have a debate with them, but they say, oh no, the debate is over.
Yeah.
Well, now there are 30,000 of us. We have 30,000 scientists, 9,000 PhDs, who have signed up to debunk global warming. And they still won't listen to us. You realize that Fox is the only cable network that'll put us on the air. CNN won't. That other thing, MSNBC, it won't. CBS, ABC, NBC, they scoff at us. We can't get on the air. If it weren't for the internet, you wouldn't even know I existed.
Number one, on the science side, we've had very divergent views. We've had dozens of experts come over the last few days and testify, giving very different opinions on the science. On the economics of it, we have not had the same kind of divergence. In fact, most economists and experts that have testified on the cost acknowledge, in fact, I'll refer to President Obama's own budget that was just passed 2 weeks ago. If you go to page 119 of the president's budget, he's anticipating generating $646 billion in new tax revenue from this bill. So clearly the president expects this bill to generate $646 billion in new taxes that even his own budget director has said would be passed on to consumers.
Congressman, you began by denying that there is a consensus on the science. There is a consensus on the science.
Thank you for joining us. The whole global warming theory may be nothing more than hot air, critics say, as a major UN climate change conference draws near. The debate stems from leaked emails stolen from a research center in Britain, which raised concern over data manipulation.
Just under 2 weeks and counting. 191 countries will head for Denmark to try and reduce greenhouse gases. But a computer hacker has shown that scientists have been pumping out hot air of their own. Thousands of emails from Britain's University of East Anglia, the main source for measuring global temperatures, posted on a Russian internet server and raising serious questions about ethics and accuracy.
So far, some of these alleged emails may actually hold the key or actually the clues to prove that the theory of global warming is a huge conspiracy. For example, there's one email coming from one scientist, and in this alleged email, the scientist claims that he had to use additional data in order to hide the decline.
Had the decline.
Global warming isn't killing anyone, and it isn't going to kill anyone. What is killing people, and killing them by the million of starvation now, is the effect of the global warming scare. Because many nations, including the United States, have taken up to a third of their agricultural land out from growing food for people who needed it to growing biofuels for clunkers that didn't. And that has meant in the last year or two a doubling, and I mean a doubling, of world food prices.
But there's also been advanced an argument, Mr Speaker, put forward by Lord Monckton, a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, that the international negotiations are in fact a conspiracy to establish world government. Now this is the most bizarre, absurd, ridiculous contention that one could imagine.
2009 is also the first year of global governance, with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet.
And we have a new President of Europe, Herman Van Rompuy. Doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, does it? I can't see him stopping the traffic in Beijing or Washington. I doubt anybody in Brussels would even recognise who he is. And yet, he's going to be paid a salary that is bigger than Obama's, which tells you all you need to know about this European political class and how they look after themselves. But at least he's an elected politician, unlike Baroness Cathy Ashton, who really is the true representation of the modern day political class. In some ways she's ideal, isn't she? She's never had a proper job and she's never been elected to anything in her life. So I guess she's perfect for this European Union.
Excuse me, Mr Farage.
Yes. We'll have the bland leading the bland, but I'm not celebrating because they'll press on with political union, and whilst our leaders may have saved face for the moment for themselves on the international stage, they have all betrayed their national democracies. The European state is here. We're about to get an avalanche of new laws because of this Lisbon Treaty. It's all about bureaucracy versus democracy. Things have gone horribly, horribly wrong.
The video we just watched began with a short piece exposing the official narrative around the September 11 attacks in New York as a complete fraud. It showed the World Trade Center Building 7 being demolished from several angles. This is the first and immediate problem we have when it comes to believing anything that politicians and the mainstream media have to say, as none of them seem brave enough to challenge this official narrative. Every time September 11 comes around, we are all reminded that this was supposedly an act of Islamic terrorism. But I've never heard a theory that proposes that Islamic terrorists had access to these three buildings prior to the plane crashes, and had the means to rig them for demolition. So I'm inclined to believe the words of Aaron Russo, who just explained this was all set up well in advance by American business interests. The video then moves on to discuss the problems of the so-called scientific consensus when it comes to climate change. Whether we're talking 10 years ago or now, there are massive financial incentives to framing every single environmental issue around carbon dioxide emissions. This is really a form of psychological warfare. Instead of looking closely at the contaminants that industry is polluting our planet with, we are reminded that we are the polluters, and that every time we exhale, we are contributing to the problem. Instead of reforming our throwaway disposable culture and banning non-biodegradable packaging, we are told to carry on as before and that everything will be fine so long as we have new taxes all based on a single metric, in this case carbon dioxide emissions, and we pay them to some new form of global government. But the truth is that we do need to fight to preserve the planet's ecology, and only global governance can do anything about it. This is because laws created at a national level can't control the behaviour of corporations, who can just uproot and look for lax controls somewhere else. This has been happening for decades now, and for decades, no one has been able to tell corporations that the environment is more important than their profits. So I certainly don't want to endorse the idea that nationalism is a solution to globalism. Instead, we must fight for the soul of planetary management. We must fight to ensure that global governance endorses sustainability and is responsible, transparent, and is further a force for equality, fairness, and religious freedom. In the extended video of Aaron Russo, who is no longer with us, he tells us that international bankers have a vision for a so-called New World Order that will implant microchips into everyone. Now, it could be in 2019 that this is no longer being considered. Instead, the dissolving of borders could lead to compulsory vaccinations and 5G technology being implemented everywhere instead, as a form of societal control. Yes, needless to say, I would agree that borders are vastly preferable to this. But let's bring this back to Greta Thunberg and talk generational change for a moment. When the September 11 attacks happened, she hadn't been born yet. I liked one particular tweet from another member of Generation Z, so I'll just recount that exchange. One poster had a picture of smiling Greta with a quote of hers, "You have stolen my childhood." Another picture next to her shows a young child about half her age again working in the field, carrying a load of heavy produce. In her defense, the following post was written as a reply. 1. She acknowledged that other kids have it worse in the second part of this quote. 2. She means that she's having to fight a battle that adults should have cared to fight years ago, and she's lost her childhood to that fight, as well as the impending climate apocalypse. 3. You're a clown. So I'm a young member of Generation X and I'm very much an adult as being accused here. That's why I'm turning back the clock a bit and showing a video of a decade of deception. When I released this together with a recut of Zeitgeist, I was challenging the establishment's shift towards global government and pushing back my own ideas and a strong sense of justice. But something happened soon after these videos were released. I came into contact with extraterrestrials and they showed me how to harmonize with the Earth. Having learned this, I can now sense how the Earth itself is constantly projecting an energy field that reveals how it will transform in the wake of a dramatic climate shift. You may have heard of ascension. This is a process whereby you can tap into this projection and see the changes that are coming to your specific location. So the truth is that while we may well be correct in dismissing the abstract scientific models that the IPCC is presenting, we cannot dismiss the very real impending threat of a climate apocalypse. The truth is that while we may or may not change anything by curtailing our carbon dioxide emissions, vast numbers of humans will perish unless we dramatically change the course of society and learn to live in harmony with the planet that has been bearing us upon its back. This is because the changes that Earth will undergo could utterly destroy many of our most densely populated areas. We must do our best to prepare for these changes rather than think we can avert them, and embrace the opportunities that this will present, all while grasping a magnitude of what's at stake. Back in 2001, we as a society did fail a younger generation, however, because we were at a crossroads and chose the wrong path. A few short months before the September 11 attacks, there was a historic gathering at a National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Here now is Dr. Stephen Greer speaking in May of 2001 as he announced the Disclosure Project to a packed press gallery.
Thank you very much, John. Members of the press, the American public, and people of the world. We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. I would like to thank Sarah McClendon, who is with us today, the famed White House correspondent, for her sponsorship of this meeting. Thank you very much, Sarah. In 1993, a group of military advisors to this project and I met out in the countryside in Virginia. And we decided that it was time for civilians military, intelligence, and other people to come together to disclose the truth about the subject which is called UFOs. Since that time, I have personally briefed a sitting director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, President Clinton's first CIA director. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, many members of Congress, members of the European leadership, the Japanese cabinet, and others. And what I have found is that none of them are surprised that this is true, but they are uniformly horrified that they have not had access to these projects. We can establish through these witnesses whom we have identified, which now number over 400, and these are people who have been inside the CIA, NSA, NRO, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all divisions of the intelligence and military community, as well as corporate witnesses, contractors to the government. And these are folks who have been involved in so-called black budget or covert unacknowledged projects. These unacknowledged special access projects are taking in at least $40 to $80 billion per year. And they are sitting on technologies that can change the world forever. The reason we are coming forward now is that we are asking for the U.S. Congress and for President Bush to move towards an official inquiry and disclosure on this subject. It has the most profound implications for the human future, for the U.S. national security, and for world peace. Specifically, technologies connected to UFO and extraterrestrial vehicles, if declassified and used for peaceful energy generation and propulsion, would solve the looming energy crisis definitively, would end global warming, would correct the environmental challenges that the Earth is facing. It is also critical that we begin to debate as a society the propriety of placing weapons in space. If indeed, as we can prove, it is true that we are not alone and that space is territory which we are sharing with other civilizations, it could be a very imprudent, destabilizing thing to place weapons in space. This is not being debated because it is off the national and international radar screens. It needs to be placed on it, and we are here today to do it. We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, that they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States, that extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 administrations that we are aware of, presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security. There is no evidence, I wish to emphasize, that these life forms from elsewhere are hostile towards us. But there is a great deal of evidence that they are concerned with our hostility. There are times when they have neutralized or rendered inert the launch capabilities of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Witnesses here today will describe those events to you. They have shown clearly that they do not want us to weaponize space, and yet we are proceeding down that dangerous path. And it will be established that these projects, because they have not been supervised properly by the Congress, by the U.S. President, by the international community, have become a threat to the national security. And for this reason, we feel we must disclose the facts. This is the beginning of the campaign for disclosure. And in a memo that I wrote to President Bush last week, I've stated that this campaign will persist until our goals are met, and they are as follows: that we have open, honest hearings on the subject in the U.S. Congress, that there be a permanent ban on the weaponization of space or the targeting of any objects of extraterrestrial origin, that there be a full and complete study of classified technologies connected to this subject to see how they could be properly declassified and applied for peaceful energy generation so that the world may get off of fossil fuels in enough time to prevent greater ecosystem damage or war over the looming energy crisis, which is sure to sweep the earth in the coming decade. This is a matter of the most pressing import. It has been ridiculed, yes. I know many in the media would like to talk about little green men. But in reality, the subject is laughed at because it is so serious. I have had grown men weep who are in the Pentagon, who are members of Congress, and who have said to me, what are we going to do? Here's what we will do. We will see that this matter is properly disclosed, and these courageous witnesses, the first 21 of over 100 that we have already interviewed on videotape, have stepped forward to speak the truth. Now, I expect people to be skeptical, but not irrationally so, because these men and women have come forward and they have their credentials, they can establish who they are, and they have been first-hand witnesses to some of the most important events in the history of the human race. As was pointed out to me by some of the men here, they were charged with handling the nuclear weapons of the United States. Their word was trusted on everything of great importance for the national security. We must trust their word now. As Monsignor Balducci said at the Vatican, in an interview I had with him recently, it is irrational not to accept the testimony of these witnesses. So please be skeptical, but that is not the same as prejudiced and closed-minded. This is a matter of great importance, and I ask the media, the scientific community, and the political community to look seriously at this matter and to do the right thing for humanity and for our children. We have available for the media and for members of Congress a nearly 500-page briefing document with transcripts from dozens of these top-secret witnesses. We have a 4-hour videotape summary. It's not a commercial product, I'll warn you, from this project of the 120 hours that we have in interviews so far. They've been boiled down to 4 hours, and it's available for the Congress to review and for the major media to review. We can establish that this subject is real and has tremendous significance for the human future. I ask on all of you who are listening to contact the members of Congress that represent you and the leaders around the world and other countries and ask them to hold an honest inquiry into this subject to support a ban on weaponizing space, since we are sharing space with other life forms. And that we move quickly as a people to understanding that this is the end of the childhood of the human race. It is time for us to become mature adults in the cosmic civilizations out there. To do this, we must become a peaceful civilization, and we must look as we go into space with an intent of cooperating with other civilizations, not weaponizing that high frontier. The men and women who will speak next will do so in order, beginning on your left. They will introduce themselves. I ask for the media to refrain from questions until each witness has spoken briefly about who they are and what they have personally been involved with or witnessed in their government, military, or government-connected careers. At the end, we will have questions. All of you may ask questions for as long as we can stay here, and we will provide you with all the information that you need. So we will begin now with the first of our witnesses, Mr. John Callahan.
I would recommend viewing a full press conference, but even in that introduction there was a lot to take in. What struck me about this event was the fact that members of the press were gathered there, and all of them were asking the right questions. These reporters, having covered the event and gathered all the necessary information they needed to write articles, would have went on to their respective news outlets and asked for permission to run the stories. They were all denied. And around 4 months later, the September 11 attacks happened. In the wake of that incident, there was no speculation on the part of the mainstream media about what had happened. Instead, they all parroted the same ridiculous story, one where 2 planes had somehow managed to completely destroy 3 buildings. But consider what was said in Stephen Greer's introduction, namely, that classified projects are sitting on technology that can give us abundant clean energy. Rather than acknowledge the existence of extraterrestrials and bring to light the reverse-engineered technology developed in secret projects, a behind-the-scenes decision was made to keep everybody hooked on oil and go after some of the biggest reserves that were not completely under the sway of the United States and their military. I'm here to tell you that this was the wrong decision, but perhaps this decision was motivated not only by greed and the fear of being exposed, but also by patriotism. I'll say it again, nationalism is not the solution to globalism, and love for your country is often completely at odds with the love of the truth. So we've seen that the important work of a disclosure project has been pretty much shunned by the mainstream, but there might be some breadcrumbs out there that show that there is some kind of preparation for a proper disclosure. Here now is a segment of an interview by Stephen Colbert as he hosted Neil deGrasse Tyson on the 8th of October 2019.
Well, I would like to talk to you about the universe for a second. You know, one of the things that you and I bond on is our love of exploring the unknown.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that I constantly have up on my desktop, on my computer, is the live feed from the International Space Station.
Very nice.
Okay?
Yeah.
I want to see what's going on planet Earth around there. For weeks now, this is what it says on the ISS feed. It says, previously recorded. What do they not want us to know, Neil Tyson? What are you scientists hiding? It's aliens.
I am not authorized to divulge.
Yes.
No. So it is true that if it were aliens, the first thing they'd take out is your ability to monitor the Earth.
Aha.
So it's consistent with that.
I say to you, aha, Neil Tyson.
No, I'm not saying it is aliens. I'm saying if aliens wanted to, like, first poke into our situation, they would make us blind and not have us see what we're up to.
No, I'm not saying the aliens are doing it. I'm saying that NASA is shutting it down so we can't see the aliens.
Oh.
We're being protected from this knowledge by our own government. Oh. You know, the snake-like UFOs over the western states, that cluster of lights off of the coast of North Carolina.
You think the government is competent enough to pull that off?
Let me tell you.
I'm just saying.
Last week, NASA's chief scientist said NASA is close to making an announcement about life on Mars and that we, the human race, are not ready for it.
Yeah.
Come on, that's saying that we know, but we're not going to tell you.
So first, I'm worried that I'm ready for it, and that might mean I'm not part of the human race, given the logic of that sentence.
So you're ready for it?
Oh, totally.
I'm ready for it, too.
Are you?
Well, here's the thing. If you aren't ready for it, would you know you're not ready for it? Or would you actually find it? If you actually found out there was even microbial life that was native to Mars, maybe the top of your head would just blow off.
If we discovered life elsewhere in the universe, it would signal a change in the human condition that we cannot foresee or imagine.
Because the first thing we'd want to know is it edible?
What's interesting is you can imagine entire strains of life that are entirely not edible to us. There are amino acids that have, where they have different chirality, so that you don't
I'm
even
sorry, one second. Stop on that one.
Oh, sorry.
What's chirality?
Sorry, they're molecules where they're different in a mirror than they are as you hold them in your hand.
So they're opposite. They're like mirror reflections of each other.
Now, are molecules normally like that?
No, some are.
Are we? Am I chiral?
We are.
We're different.
You haven't looked in the mirror lately? You don't know your symmetries?
Yeah, look at that thing. Look at that thing right there.
Yeah, so for example, DNA turns in only one direction, not the other direction. And that's true for all life on Earth.
Which way is it?
It's, if you want to think of this as clockwise up, yeah.
And it never goes counterclockwise?
No, not for life on Earth, no. Yeah, so these are things that are different in a mirror. So if you find life, it could be, you might want to eat it, but it would have no nutritional value to you, like fiber.
What do you think? What do you think?
It's true. Don't shoot the messenger. It goes right through you. Don't.
So we're going to find Metamucil on Mars.
No. So astrophysically, it is practically as interesting if we found mats of microbial life as it would if it was like a green alien with a ray gun, because it's life somewhere off of Earth. That's the boundary we'd be crossing in our quest to convert ignorance into knowledge.
Do you think that it would unite humanity?
Good point. So I don't know for sure, but I can tell you, given how tribal we have all been, especially in recent years, where we are finding reasons to separate ourselves and then fight, to find life somewhere else might be the first occasion to unify Earth as a tribe of its own.
Well, listen, we have to take a little bit of a break, but don't go away. We'll be right back with more Neil deGrasse Tyson, everybody.
Last month was a fair amount of attention around a planned Area 51 raid, and the US Navy admitted that some of their captured UFO footage was real, but didn't offer much in the way of an interpretation. So a discussion like this is an attempt by the mainstream media to put out someone that they're presenting as an authority on the matter, and take something that's actually quite exciting and make it seem either dull or threatening. Its immediate inclination is to paint aliens as a threat. Well, the first thing I would do is knock out our communications, he said. Really? The truth is that extraterrestrials have made various attempts to bypass governments and speak to people directly. This is a picture of a 2002 crabwood crop circle. The wheel can be read in ASCII code, one line declaring simply, "We oppose deception." To his credit, Stephen Colbert brushed this nonsense aside and got to the heart of the matter, saying what many of us are sure of at this point, that we are being protected from this knowledge by our own government. And Neil's response was, "Oh, you think they're competent enough to do that?" So remember back to what we just explained happened after the September 11 attacks. Your cover story doesn't even need to be that plausible, but if you get enough people to repeat it, this doesn't matter. Also, if people are traumatized, they are more susceptible to believing what it is you're telling them. When it comes to covering up the existence of extraterrestrials, however, the best way to put this into a proper historical context is to read The Day After Roswell, a book released by Colonel Philip J. Corso back in 1997. It tells exactly what happened in regards to the Roswell crash of an alien ship, and explains how the United States has essentially remained on a war footing of these craft ever since the 1940s. If you imagine every single UFO as a potential Nazi, then you can quickly grasp the nature of a military-industrial mindset, and then a lot of things begin to make sense. It wasn't that long ago that former President Barack Obama also went on a late-night talk show, and his response to a similar line of questioning was quite bizarre. He claimed that the aliens won't let it happen, that he can't reveal anything, and further, that they exercise strict control over us. Obviously most will think this is just a joke, but I'm not so sure. Let's not dismiss the possibility that the United States did lose a confrontation to a technologically superior force, and as a result made some embarrassing concessions. To that I can only say, the truth will set you free. One last statement from our interview or comment on is a reference to a recent statement from a NASA scientist. According to a Telegraph article, Planetary Science Division Director Dr. Jim Green boasted the agency was close to making some announcements about finding life on Mars, but that we're not ready for it. First off, not many people are going to get excited about a microbe on Mars. Otherwise, politicians may not be ready, scientists may not be ready, military generals might not be ready, but I'm quite sure the rest of us are. Yes, people have been tribal, but there hasn't been much coming from the top down to inspire us to do better, has there? As Greta Thunberg stated recently in World Leaders, how dare you, all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. I hope you've enjoyed this Alpha Hour of Power series. If you'd like to have me speak at an event, contact me on Twitter @SpeaksInTruth. I anticipate that these will be the last 3 videos I release on the internet before being confirmed in the Catholic faith in Easter of 2020. So let us close with the Lord's Prayer. Say it with me now if you know it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.